Welcome everybody to this evening's webinar. We're going to talk about feeding the injured horse. There is a lot of nutritional support that goes into feeding a sick or injured horse. Um, I've been discussing a lot lately with some of the reps. Veterinarians give you advice, take-home advice for how to manage pain, how to limit re-injury. Um, Maybe they're giving drugs that are short-term anti-inflammatories, but we, as the nutrition component of the diet, can also work to support all of those kind of requirements. Has the horse had a catastrophic injury like a broken leg, and the vet has set it home with anti-inflammatories and asked to minimize turnout? Okay, so what do we need to do? Maybe it's on antibiotics as well. What do we need to do nutritionally to overcome some of the negatives that are going to come with the management that is necessary due to the injury, and support that horse the best that we possibly can. And I think there's some pretty big myths when it comes to feeding a sick or injured horse, because the first thing with a sick or injured horse is their workload is significantly decreased, if at all, any workload. So the first mistake that people make is to take away all of the nutrition. And we will get into that. And they do that because they think, well, the horse isn't exercising. I don't want him to behaviorally injure himself more because he gets really excitable in the stall. But it's actually a mistake to cut back too much on the nutrition. So we'll talk about different types of injuries, and the actual consequence of an injury and what it does to the body on a biochemical level. Nutrients used by injured horses. Actually being injured is very calorie and protein demanding on an animal. And then some of those tips and tools. So there's many types of injuries. When we think about catastrophic injuries, we think about bone fractures, but then we've just got normal skeletal lameness or muscle injuries, surgeries of any number of different types of surgeries, whether that is a colic surgery or surgery on a horse's throat to have them overcome something like roaring. Is it a tendon surgery or some kind of OCD surgery? Surgery on an animal, just like on a person, is pretty demanding. Is it just a cough or a cold, or do they have some other disease like metabolic syndrome, Cushing's? Um, but any number of these injuries, but the body, in healing itself and trying to boost its immune system, will respond similarly. Oh, so, the first thing we do is obviously we stop training. If they're at a training facility, we usually take them back to the home farm. Sometimes they stay at that training facility to be rehabbed or recover. Um, they're usually on stall rest with limited to no turnout, depending on what that injury or surgery was. Oops, I went backwards, sorry. Pain naturally causes a decreased appetite. It does in people as well. There's a stress response in the animal. So remember, horses are flight animals. We've got fight or flight animals, right? And the flight animal, he's a prey animal, and he is worried about. A lot of horses are actually worried about showing pain or lameness or injury, because in the wild, that would mean that they were a target for a predator. So there are a lot of horses that are very stoic and don't show a lot of pain, but there is a stress response as well that comes with this injury. But they do decrease their appetite. There's usually inflammation. All of this increases energy demands, and oftentimes because they've decreased their appetite, they're in this stressed state and their body is actually requiring more calories, they lose weight. So they actually go into what we call hypermetabolism. If it was a low metabolism, it would be hypo, sorry, and hyper means a really high active metabolism. It's kind of on overdrive. And so this animal has a really high, and not high like a racehorse, but an elevated level of energy requirement. They start to, because we may not be feeding them or they're not consuming enough calories because their appetite is decreased, they go into a catabolic state. So they actually start to break down their own tissues in order to fuel that recovery, the immune system, muscle cell health. So the body is using energy to fuel the healing process, and that, like I said, the protein that is really important is going to come from their own tissues, muscle, etc. They can also then become a little bit more weak because of that loss of protein. It'll use up all its glucose and fat first and then start to break down its own tissues. This will delay healing. It'll slow down healing. And there are ways to minimize this. And obviously your veterinarian is going to send you home with pain medication. So if the horse is not feeling that pain, that's going to decrease that stress level. So not only is medication decreasing the pain so they're not feeling it, but it's also decreasing that stress response so they don't have this elevated cortisol, which drives all those nutrients away from the immune system and from recovery. Because remember, when the horse is, being that it's a flight animal and it needs to run away from prey, when it gets in that stress response, the body is just ready to run. And so all of its nutrients end up in its extremities because it's ready to go. At any moment, it is ready to flee from that situation. So we want to decrease that pain, resolve any of that pain, any of that infection, and then provide really high quality nutrition. Almost like when you've got late gestation, when the foal is really big in that mare's uterus, taking up a lot of space. So anything that broodmare eats in that last trimester has to be really calorie dense because she's not going to have a lot of room to consume that. Same with these horses. If their appetite is already bit decreased, we want to make sure that every mouthful of food that they're taking in is really high in nutritional value. So if we look at that non-injured, non-stressed, non-working horse, 90% of the calories are coming from fat stores within the body, and about 5 to 8% come from protein. But if we look at a horse that's been stressed or injured, we got 50% coming from the stored body fat, 20% of the calories coming from stored carbohydrates. That's that glucose that's in the muscle. And then about 30% of those calories are going to come from the breakdown of protein in the muscle and organs. And what we want to do is avoid that. We want to not allow that much calories to come from the breakdown of the own body, that catabolic state, because it just decreases healing. And then you've got a longer recovery time. Not only a longer recovery time, let's say we get that horse recovered, but he broke down a bunch of his top line just trying to heal. So now we've got a longer window of not necessarily recovering from the injury, but building back muscle and stamina to get back to competition fit where they were before said injury. So the time to get them back to where they were before the injury is really increased. So we have an elevated energy requirement. We've got to fuel recovery. Healing isn't free. It takes actually quite a lot of energy. We have an elevated protein requirement. We've got to heal muscle and bone, and that takes protein and energy combined. We also have a slightly higher trace mineral requirement and vitamin requirement. If it was a bone injury, we may need some additional calcium or an alternative source of calcium that's much more bioavailable, something like the marine calcium. So we know that there's not a lot of actual energy requirements set out for sick horses, but when we look and we extrapolate, we can tell that the horse at when they're sick has about a 25% increase in protein and calories over maintenance. So I think this is the best way to look at it. If we look at a horse that's stabled here on the very left, um, doing no exercise, you can see their protein in red and energy in blue requirements. Then if we look at them in light exercise, we start to have a slightly increased amount of protein and energy requirement. If they're in heavy exercise, you can see significantly higher protein and energy requirements. But what we've estimated is that a sick or injured horse actually has protein and energy requirements very similar to horses at light work and light exercise. So when I formulate diets for horses that are sick or injured, I don't take them all the way back to maintenance. Let's say they were a racehorse or a barrel racing horse and they were doing a lot of exercise at speed and now they're stuck in a stall and we don't want them to be excitable or hyper. I don't take them all the way back to maintenance requirements. I take them back to light exercise requirements so that we make sure that we're supporting that fuel and fueling that healing and recovery. So copper, zinc, and selenium, they're involved in tissue regeneration. We've got amino acids, your lysine, methionine, threonine. They help with protein synthesis. Omega-3 fatty acids like the DHA helps to fuel the immune function, as does vitamin E. So this is what a lot of people, racehorses are the ones that definitely get injured the most frequently. And so we're dealing with very physically fit animals conditioned to exercise daily. Here's the other part that I don't think a lot of people think about is the mental stress on a horse when you completely change overnight, you change their routine. Horses are very routine animals. We all know that every morning when you go out there at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. and feed the horses, they are ready and waiting. And if you're 5 minutes late, they are stomping the door down. They're very routine. Say you have a horse that exercises regularly every day and now they're injured and they're stuck in a stall. Remember that change in their daily schedule also adds to their stress levels. So when we're adding energy or calories to the diet, we need to make sure that we're adding enough calories without adding a lot of ingredients that we know are going to further exacerbate any hyperactivity or behavior issues. So we may have had a racehorse or a barrel racing horse, or even just a heavy working horse, eating a high grain diet, high cereal grains, a lot of corn, oats, barley, a racehorse feed that was very high in sugars and starches to fuel that quick release energy. And here's another thing we've got to do gradually is remember, we don't want to make rapid feeding changes. So we don't want to have the racehorse on the track. He's eating, 10, 12 pounds of race feed a day. He gets injured. We take him home, put him in a stall, and then feed him something that's high in fat and fiber because we know that that's not going to make him excitable. That's a rapid feeding change. So while we do want to wean that horse back off a really high sugar and starch diet and probably get more of their calories from fat and fiber, we also need to do that gradually. And if we can't do it gradually, then we need to make sure that we're implementing digestive aids like the DDA or the rescue aid so that they can support that rapid digestive change. So oil, the DAC oil, it's got no sugar in it, it's got no starch in it. It's got a little extra omega-3 fatty acids in there. It's got some vitamin E in there. I would also recommend that we're adding just extra straight vitamin E, because vitamin E is a powerful antioxidant. What's going to be happening in this horse with this injury is oxidative stress, and we need to combat that. So vitamin E, natural vitamin E, if the horse isn't on it, then we need to make sure we get them on it. If they are, then we can bump up the amount that they are currently receiving. Beet pulp is a really good fiber source. The other thing about beet pulp that can be beneficial is because it absorbs so much water, we can increase the hydration status of the horse. When they're stuck in a stall, they may not want to drink as much. The other thing is, when a horse exercises, that stimulates muscular contractions throughout the digestive tract that continue to help push food down the digestive tract, right? It's the same with people. When they stand in a stall after they've been used to exercising and they eat, they don't have that exercise to help move along that digestive contents. And also, let's say the horse has been through some kind of surgery where they've had to go under full anesthesia, and they were knocked out. Anesthesia also, those drugs slow the motility of the gut. So we've got that working against us. We've got the lack of exercise working against us. So the moving food through the digestive system becomes an important factor for me to make sure that their gut motility continues to work. So adding something like beet pulp that I can wet and add hydration to the gut so that we decrease our risk for impaction colic. It's actually a really good source of fiber. Alfalfa, hay pellets, cubes, it really doesn't matter to me. Alfalfa is high in protein and calories. I like to have a constant access to hay. Now, if the horse has gone through a colic surgery and we're worried about kind of just, so we want to put really digestible, soft feed into the horse's gut for the first week or so, then we're going to be looking to more cubes or pellets that can be soaked into a mash, beet pulp even, and not long stem hay. Um, Avoiding excess, increasing the grain. And when I say that, I really mean the sugars and the starches, so the cereal grains. We want to make sure that we're still giving them plenty of calories, but not from sources that can also be excitable to the horse. Um, you want to have you want to make sure that your horse has at least a 5 to a 6 body condition score. A lot of our performance horses will be heavier than that, but a lot of our race horses or standardbred horses, buggy horses, may be more of a 4 to a 4.5. And we know that's their like peak exercising condition, but they don't have a lot of excess fat or cushion or energy to support that healing. Make sure that we pump up that body condition a little. You're actually hurting them if you keep them too thin. I'm trying to click my slide. So I mentioned that protein requirements are elevated and the body is literally burning up muscle protein. So we put a little extra in the diet. Primary protein source, 4 to 6 pounds of alfalfa can be really beneficial. Um, Something like the Total Performance or the orange is going to make sure that the vitamins and minerals are being supplied in the diet. Um, So if we look at this diet here, if we just say, oh, I'm just going to add some calories on top of the forage, right? We've got grass hay, we've got alfalfa, we've got beet pulp, 15 pounds of grass hay, 5 pounds of alfalfa, and a pound of beet pulp. And so if this is a 1,000-pound horse, we're giving it about 2% of its body weight in dry fiber per day. And it's meeting its calorie requirements because you can see DE, digestible energy, on the bottom there. It's meeting its energy requirements. It's even meeting its crude protein and its calcium requirements. But phosphorus, copper, zinc, selenium, manganese, and iodine are all deficient, as is vitamin E. So if we change that diet, because we know that those vitamins and minerals are also really critical for boosting immune function and supporting overall health, if we just add something like 2 ounces of the total performance to that same diet, now we can see that all of those phosphorus, copper, zinc, selenium, manganese, not so much iodine, but we feed an iodized salt, and that will correct the iodine deficiency. So I mentioned E-Natural, other supplements that are beneficial. The E-Natural can significantly increase muscle fiber regeneration after injury. It's also a powerful antioxidant. So any of that stress, it's going to help decrease that. DHA Perform we don't have anymore, but the DHA is in the Stallion supplement, the Breeders Excel has DHA in it. So you can feed that, and that is the omega-3 fatty acid that's going to help with inflammation and wound healing. DDA, if your horse has been getting antibiotics or other drugs that can upset digestive microbes, even just going under, being fully sedated or being under anesthesia can upset, like I said, gut motility and digestive microbes. And if your horse has not been able to be fed, it had to be fasted so that it could go through surgery. I mean, there's a whole slew of different reasons why the DDA or the rescue aid are beneficial. We also know that even if your horse has never been stressed and never had a gastric ulcer in its life, if you put it on stall rest and it's not used to it, if it's decreased appetite, if it's been on a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, you changed its daily routine, all of these things will increase the incidence of gastric ulcers. So something like the Cool Gut for a short period of time while they're going through this stress would be a good addition to the diet. So the other thing that we know can happen when we have stress is a breakdown in that hindgut tissue. So if we look at this picture here, those kind of boxes on the bottom with the little fingers coming out the top, they're cells that line the intestinal wall. And the lining of the intestinal wall between the contents of the intestine, so all the food, and the bloodstream, it's only 1 cell thick. Those little fingers that are on the inside of the intestine, increasing the surface area of those cells so that we can absorb more nutrients. That's what those fingers are. But between those cells, you can see those lines. That's what we call tight junctions. And in a healthy digestive system, they're nice and tight together. They're really squeezed together. So there's no non-digested food particles sliding between those cells. But in a sick horse or an injured horse or a horse with any kind of stress, we know that those tight junctions, those connections between the cells lining the intestine, they're the first things that break down. And what happens then is we have non-digested food particles and bacterial debris and all kinds of junk flowing out of the digestive system where it was safe and now into the bloodstream where it's causing all kinds of damage. So what have we got to overcome that? We have the digestive aid and the rescue aid, and one of the key ingredients in both of those products is the GI Pro 3. Now, the GI Pro 3, which is only available to Performance Horse Nutrition customers, is a probiotic. It's a 3-strain probiotic, 3 strains of bacillus. And those 3 have been researched scientifically to work extremely well together. Individually, they're all great, but you put them together and they're a really cohesive unit. And the first thing we wanted to do when we developed this was make sure that, because we knew, okay, these 3 strains of bacillus are going to do all kinds of great things in the hindgut of the horse when it comes to the microbes, but we've got to get it there in the first place. So it's got to withstand high temperatures of pelleting or manufacturing. It's got to withstand the acidity in the stomach, and it's also got to be able to have a good shelf life. And this product actually needs to be activated by the acid in the stomach, and that kind of breaks down this outer layer layer, so that then it's activated and used in the small intestine and the large intestine. And a few of the pathogenic bacteria that either, number one, cause disease or come as a result of a weakened immune system and a weakened horse. So your horse goes in for a colic surgery and its immune system's really decreased, and it comes home with C. diff or some other Clostridia causing diarrhea. We've also got other pathogenic bacteria like Rhodococcus, Streptococcus, Salmonella. All of these bacteria, pathogenic bacteria, see weakness in the animal and attack. So they cause strangles, loose manure, diarrhea, lung abscesses in young foals, overall dysbiosis, which just means, it's upset the status quo. So GI Pro 3 is a true probiotic. It's going to arrive alive into the hindgut, and it's proven that it's going to interfere with the communication pathways of those bad bacteria. So while those bad bacteria constantly sit in the animal's gut, right? They sit in the horse's hindgut, but in a healthy horse, they can't do anything because the immune system of the horse and the gut lining is strong, and so they sit in the digestive tract and they go out in the manure and they don't cause any damage. But when your horse is sick and injured, first thing that I said was breaking down is those cells, and so that then allows a weakness in the immune system and in that gut lining, and those pathogenic bacteria attack. And when they see that weakness, they also call to all their buddies to say, oh, there's a weakness here, come and proliferate and replicate and replicate. And so the GI Pro 3 will interfere with that communication pathway, so that whilst there's still bad bacteria in your gut, only one will go to that area and it won't be able to replicate and it won't be able to cause all that damage. So which products have the therapeutic or full strength dose of the GI Pro 3, the Rescue Aid, either the paste or the powder, and the DDA. There is, if you look in the catalog, you'll see the little GI Pro 3 logo on a lot of other products, but it isn't what we call a supportive level, so not the full therapeutic dose. And remember, the only supplements, because PHN does not work with any other supplement companies, the only supplements that have GI Pro 3 are the DAC supplements. So what else? Well, once your horse is being cleared for exercise, we do know that exercise stimulates blood flow, right? If you can pump more blood around the body, then all of these nutritional components that we're putting into the horse that then get absorbed into the bloodstream, then can get around the whole horse. Exercise also helps to reduce muscle loss. If possible, daily turn out into small pens. I know swimming, walking machines are very cost prohibitive for a lot of people, but if you have access to those under veterinary permission, they can be a good benefit. Um, there are many types of injuries, but the body responds to those injuries all in a similar way. Stress response causes inflammation, increased energy demand, and oftentimes weight loss, because we go into this hypermetabolism where we start to actually break down the body. So we need to make sure that we're stimulating appetite, we're keeping horses eating, just keeping the gut healthy. The DDA is going to do that. We need to make sure that we're maintaining their energy and protein intake, and that's not necessarily by feeding them their high sugar starch diet that they were being fed before. We need to transition them off that and onto more of a higher fat, higher fiber type diet. And if we need to make that transition more rapidly, then again, yes, the Rescue Aid and the DDA can help you with making a rapid feeding change. We're trying to minimize that excitable behavior by decreasing those sugars and starches. You've got oil, the DAC oil, beet pulp, hay, depending on the injury. Again, we mentioned if the horse has had colic surgery, then we want to make sure we're probably feeding pellets and cubes. It's a little easier to digest. Thin horses heal slower. They've got less energy reserves. Remember, vitamin E, vitamin D, and vitamin K, all very, very important for the immune system. Where are they stored? They are stored in the fat. If your horse is thin and doesn't have a lot of fat, they're not able to store a lot of those vitamins. Providing exercise and turnout as soon as possible after that injury can be really beneficial as well, not only just for physical health, but for mental health. With that, I'll take any questions.